Pero, ¿por qué un sistema tan aberrante se mantiene en el tiempo? ¿Por qué no despierta más rechazo en la gente? Si hay tanta gente que está sufriendo.
But why has such an aberrant system lasted all this time? Why it doesn't produce more rejection? Among other reasons, because capitalism creates the work it needs. It is able to convince people that its defects can be fixed from inside. Without the necessity of changing the system, you can fight to shorten the work day, to increase the wages, to improve the work conditions. And in fact, some social improvements can be obtained from governments that are more sensitive to the needs of the people. But what nobody can resolve is the injustice that is the heart of the capitalist system. Its defects are not accidental, but rather they are part of the essence of the system. Propaganda is necessary for capitalism to convince the workers and the people more generally that this capitalism with a human face is possible. Arms are no longer needed to dominate society when you are able to convince people that capitalism is the only way to meet their needs. Another thing that has helped capitalism to survive is that the socialist countries, or countries that have called themselves socialists, have not had extraordinary economic success. There was a time when they actually competed with capitalism, but then the capitalist countries were more able to adapt themselves to the technological revolution, the inventions, the forms of organization of production, while the socialist countries stagnate. But in addition to these two factors that explain the survival of capitalism, there is another one, the way that capitalism succeeds in dividing the working class. As good strategists, the capitalists know that it's necessary to divide to rule, and they apply different tactics for doing so. Tactics that go from the way in that they organize the work inside the companies to moving their operation to where labor power is cheaper and less protected by the labor laws. But not only that, it also divides the workers in different categories: workers in overall, manual workers, and the mid-level technicians, supervisors, foremen, that is, different categories of workers. Sometimes there are unions of manual workers, unions of supervisors, and of who knows what. Not only are there trade unions of different categories of workers, but parallel trade unions in the same branch. In addition to all of what we have mentioned today, there is a terrible way in which to divide workers. If workers struggle for better wage in developed countries, what do capitalists do? As workers in these countries have had wage gains and in general very significant achievement for their daily life, the capitalists look for countries where the labor is cheaper, and they move their operation to that place. But if the government decides workers should be paid higher wages, should have better social security, better health care, and so on, what do capitalists do? They leave the country and install themselves in another country where they found better conditions to win more profit. In doing so, they generate a contradiction between the working class of the more developed country and the working class of the less developed countries. Today, in the European countries, what do we see? We see a fight against migrants. There is unemployment, and top it off, people come from the countries of the south to fill their viable jobs. We cannot deny that capitalism has succeeded in dividing the working class. Sometimes even the concept of work that capitalism uses portrays certain workers as different, as if they were not workers. For example, in Latin America, nearly 50% of the workers are self-employed workers or so-called independent workers, and many times they are not considered as workers in the laws. In Marx's time, things were very different. To identify the working class was very easy. In relation of all what I have exposed before, two major tasks arise for those who want to fight against capitalism. The first is the necessity to study the essence of this economic system so that the struggles are directed against the heart of the system, facing the question of the system's reproduction. The second is the necessity to confront the capitalist strategy of dividing workers by making a great effort to organize and unite the working class in the 21st century. In doing so, we should consider that many of its components are no longer in the industrial big concentration of the past, but they are rather dispersed in many forms of production and services, including the work done at home. We must organize and unite the new working class. But to reveal the deep nature of capitalism, that is to say, to demonstrate that it exploits human work, it is not an easy task. It requires scientific research. A great part of that theoretical effort was carried out in the 19th century by a German called Karl Marx. He devoted his life to study the logic of capitalism. For understanding what he did, you have to know that it's not always what appears at first sight that lets you understand things. You have to go to the essence of something to understand it. And that was what Marx precisely did. He did a scientific study of capitalism. Scientific study is an organized, systematic investigation that does not stay in the appearance of things but study its essence, that looks to establish a relationship among them and investigate in the causes of the phenomena. Why do we insist so much on this? Because only scientific knowledge permits us to know the causes of the phenomena and allowed us to act on reality and transform it. I can give an example so you can understand what I mean. How does a doctor cure a patient's disease? Because sometimes you have a belly ache and you describe it to your mom, or you describe the symptom to yourself. And a lot of people talk about the symptom, but that is not the sign, isn't it? It is very easy to say, I feel such thing. What the doctor knows is the cause that produced this symptom. And only by knowing what the cause are can I get the treatment which will help me to heal. Well, it happens in the same in society. Our society is sick because of capitalism. The diagnosis is clear, but the problem is that it is not enough to have a correct diagnosis. We need to know how capitalism works, what its logic is, which are the causes that produce those symptoms. And it was precisely Marx who discovered the laws of how capitalism operates, the logic of the system, and who, through a scientific knowledge, gave to the workers of the world the weapons, the ideas to combat, to fight against the system. Fidel Castro often speaks of the battle of ideas. These ideas allow us to help people understand that the capitalist system is exploiting them and that the wealth produced by the workers is appropriated by others. This issue is going to be a subject of several lectures. Almost all of the ideas that we are going to explore in these and in other lectures are inspired by these very serious studies of Karl Marx. Although we are going to add some things such as the topic of women's work. In Marx's time there was not the sensitivity about this topic as there is today.